The Debt Commission taking flack for calling to cut 200,000 government jobs, even though they wouldn't start slashing until 2012. Those critics better sit down for Eric's plan to save taxpayers a bundle. Eric, fire away.
Now, here we go, Brenda. Forget 10% over the next 10 years. How about 20% right now, slash 400,000 government jobs right now? Guess what? It saves $48 billion a year times 10 years, almost $500 billion. That's an amazing amount of money. Start doing it right now. You know, that's the difference between government and private. In the private sector, they do it right away. Government, they'll take 10 years to do half the battle.
And Jamu, in the private sector, many of us have faced cut benefits, cut jobs, all the way around. What about on Uncle Sam's payrolls? Doesn't Eric's plan make sense?
Well, I think it's pretty clear to most Americans that what they need to hear right now is you're hired, not you're fired. We are clawing our way out of this recession, and Eric, you want to just take a bulldozer and knock us back into the ditch.
I want them to hear you're hired in the private sector. Sure. You're fired in the government's federal sector, and bring them over to the private sector where the job will be there for good.
Well, it's great that jobs in the private sector have been increasing over the last 10 months, and we expect to continue to see those increases. But you also have to take into account the services that federal workers provide for us. What do you want to say? Just that, you know, we're not going to have food safety inspectors. We're not going to have people inspecting mines. We're going to have veterans waiting in lines longer to get their benefits. Elderly and disabled having to navigate the Social Security system, make it more difficult for them. This is not the way to get us out of the recession, is to fire 400,000 people.
Okay, I got to go to Gary B, because talk a little bit about the kind of money and the compensation gap that we see sometimes between federal and private workers.
Exactly, Brennan. Let's just stipulate that Jamu is right, that every single federal employee does a wonderful job. Okay, we'll stipulate that. The fact is that if you're comparing even like-for-like jobs to the private sector, just based on salary alone, they get about 60% more. That's like-for-like jobs. You comparing lawyers to lawyers or gardeners to gardeners. If you throw in benefits, they get about double the private sector. So you can clearly see, Jamu, the effect that unionization, of course the government is the biggest union employer out there, has on wages. As Eric points out, we simply can't afford it. So you can adopt Eric's approach, which actually I think is fine, or, Jamu, maybe we'll do kind of, you know, a combination of what you and Eric were talking about. Maybe just privatize it. For example, Canada, all the air traffic controllers there are privatized. We can do the same thing here and cut expenses.
Okay, but Jonas, you actually think with unemployment near double digits, and thank you for joining us for this segment.
Good to be had.
Near double digits, this is not the time to do this?
Yeah, look, it took 80 years to make the government big. You can't unwind it in 2 years. That's already an aggressive assumption. I like that assumption. It's a good idea to reduce the government by basically not replacing the people that retire. But you just start, just because Eric wants to dump 20% arbitrarily of the people in the government, you do that when there's 10% unemployment.
Not arbitrarily.
Forget it. You can have
20%. Yeah.
Well, it's a number that you want to cut the government during a recession or during a weak economy with high unemployment. It's not a very good idea, in my opinion.
Well, hold on. Okay, yeah. What does history tell us, Tobin? It's happened very few times. Post-World War II was one of them.
Yeah, I know. This is Toby, the professor. Two facts here. One is the amount of people making over $150,000 in the federal government has doubled. It's gone up $150,000 in the last 2 years, Jonas. So that was not 80 years in creation. That happened, you know, significantly in the last 24 months. Number two, let's look at World War II. You know, we cut the payroll 58% after World War II as we built up. And, you know, not only did the economy not fall apart, unemployment rate went up, but it worked through the system because they went into the private sector. And you know what? If I worked in the public sector, I guess I would be a little mad, too, taking a 50% haircut for doing the same thing. But if we're all going to sacrifice, if the 2% are going to sacrifice along with the 98%, let's all sacrifice together.
Okay, Jamu, you've got 20 seconds to take them on.
We cannot be saying you are fired to hundreds of thousands of federal workers in the private sector in this current environment. That is absolutely taking us backwards instead of moving forward.
All right, that's got to be the last word.